Did Jesus become king in 1914? Did this year start his invisible presence? Did this year mark the beginning of the last days? Some believe this is the case. They say that world conditions since 1914 form a composite sign that Jesus spoke about in Matthew chapter 24, also known as the Olivet Discourse. Often those who hold to this belief open with verse 3. While he was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples approached him privately, saying, "Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your presence, and of the conclusion of the system of things?" Thereafter, verse 7 is referenced as a composite sign of Jesus' presence and that of the last days. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be food shortages and earthquakes in one place after another. The parallel account in Luke chapter 21 reads, "Then he said to them, Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be great earthquakes, and in one place after another food shortages and pestilences, and there will be fearful sights, and from heaven great signs." Often this is paired with Matthew chapter 24 verse 12, which says, "Because of the increasing of lawlessness, the love of the greater number will grow cold." Those who believe that the last days began in 1914 point to what they see as a composite sign of these 5 features: wars, earthquakes, food shortages, pestilences, and lawlessness. However, is this what Jesus meant? Note that in each of the parallel accounts of what is called the Olivet Discourse, the first thing Jesus does when he answers his apostles is to give them a stern warning. Notice how Luke renders this warning. "And he said, See that you are not led astray, for many will come in my name, saying, I am he, and the time is at hand. Do not go after them." Throughout the centuries, there have been many who either claim to be Christ or have come in his name and said, "The time is at hand." Jesus warns, "Do not go after them." Do we take such admonition seriously? Going back to Matthew 24, starting in verse 4, the warning is worded this way. In answer, Jesus said to them, "Look out that nobody misleads you, for many will come on the basis of my name, saying, I am the Christ, and will mislead many. You are going to hear of wars and reports of wars. See that you are not alarmed, for these things must take place, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be food shortages and earthquakes in one place after another." Again, we find that Jesus warns us not to be misled. Why would this be a danger to some? Because they would hear of wars and reports of wars, but these would be par for the course in terms of human history. Followers of Christ should not be alarmed into thinking that such events meant the end was impending. Some make a distinction between the thoughts of verse 6 and verse 7, but in the original writings, of course, there were no verses or even punctuation marks. The thoughts of verse 6 and 7 are one and the same. In fact, let us reread this without the separation of verses or periods. "You are going to hear of wars and reports of wars. See that you are not alarmed, for these things must take place. But the end is not yet, for nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be food shortages and earthquakes in one place after another." Thus, some read these verses not as any sort of composite sign, but as the non-sign. Wars, reports of wars, international and civil conflicts, famines, earthquakes were not to be taken as indications that the end was at hand. They were not to be a cause for alarm. These things must take place throughout human history. Of course, those who teach that the last days began in 1914 say it differently. They argue that since 1914, wars, earthquakes, food shortages, pestilences, and lawlessness have been on the increase and have plagued the world in unprecedented measure. It is said that these conditions are worse than ever and continue to deteriorate, and it is not that any one of these features have been on the increase, but the composite of all 5, which, they say, proves that the last days started in 1914. Therefore, we will start by examining each of these 5 points and see if indeed the composite of these features has grown worse since 1914.